Andy, you're probably going to think I'm making this up because the numbers are so stunning. But with the newest data, take a guess how many ounces of silver have reportedly been added into these silver trusts just over the last 4 weeks alone.
25 million.
How about 74.9 million in
That's
4
just
weeks?
incredible.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics, and it is time once again for the physical silver and gold market update with Andy Schectman of precious metals dealer Miles Franklin. Andy, appreciate you joining me again today. We're recording on Friday morning, and certainly a lot happening in the world, which we will dig into, but I'd like to always just hear how you're doing first before we get into it.
Chris, doing great, buddy. Thanks for having me back. It's amazing what 24 or 48 hours does here in Minneapolis. Things seem to be much more calm. It's also amazing what happens when you roll 12, 13,000 National Guard troops into the city, and has a way of calming everybody down. But it's not the chaos that it was last week when we spoke. Thank goodness.
Yeah, and Andy, we're going to get to the metals and all that stuff in a minute, although there's a few things going on here that, I mean, I guess each week as the show goes on, I mean, I try to keep it to economics, although some of this stuff that you see happening is kind of hard to handle certain days. So I think a lot of people who are listening are noticing and feeling these things as well. So first question, one question about what you've seen, especially since you're in Minnesota. I found it interesting hearing both Trump and the governor of Minnesota talk about how these were organized riots that involved people from out of state. Again, I don't know that I could factually back this up, but gee, it sure seems hard to me to believe that the George Soros cult, and you know, when you have a history of some of these different groups that try and ratchet people up and cause trouble. I mean, we know the Rothschilds finance both sides of the war and just sit there giggling at all the negative energy. I'm curious your thoughts, since you're there, you're seeing it, it's in your hometown. Any comment on that?
Yeah, well, you know, I think one of the things that people miss in thinking about this is that it doesn't need to be a armada, if you will, of soldiers hidden in plain clothes that are needed to help incite an insurrection. It may just take a few dozen, or maybe several dozen that are spread out, breaking windows, starting fires. The number of fires that were started throughout Minneapolis was unreal, starting with the police station, a post office, gas stations, grocery stores. The people in those neighborhoods would have no reason to burn down their infrastructure, to burn down generationally owned family businesses. So if indeed there was, and I would argue that there's a lot of empirical evidence anyway that points towards that being the case. Yeah, I think that you don't need to have 500 people representing Antifa or Black Lives Matters or whatever it may be shipped in from all parts of the country to incite a riot. But if you have just enough people trained in getting this rolling and starting the chaos, I think that's kind of what happened here. So no, I don't think it was all people from out of state. I think every one of these states that experience looting has, you know, people in their own state that are involved in this. But I do think there is an element of planning and of coordination that is hard to ignore.
I mean,
sure.
isn't that what these groups like the CIA are, their whole purpose is? And I don't know whether it's, you know, the CIA or this group or Soros. And so again, I'm not trying to say, and maybe I'm influenced. I'm reading a David Icke book right now, so I'm hearing on one hand, you know, about some of the ways some of these things are set up, which is beyond shocking. Again, it's fascinating. He wrote this book 20 years ago talking about some disturbing amounts of pedophilia activity, which we're seeing increasing evidence come out from. And it just, I mean, we've just lived through Corona, which, I mean, you don't need a PhD to see that what we're being told there's a lot of holes in that story. And it's just, and then sad to see the way there's everybody's getting riled up, everybody's getting angry and understandably pissed off and wanting to blame someone else. And, you know, again, I think there's some point at which, one-upping the violence, if you're ever going to solve it, that has to end. But, my guess is also that the majority of police officers aren't bad people and don't stand for this type of thing. And anyway, it's just
look, Chris,
sad.
the bottom line is there's a fine line between conspiracy and reality everywhere that you look. And you're right. Coronavirus, you mentioned, we're just on the other side of coronavirus, but, are we or aren't we? I will argue for sure that the information that is the narrative that is being given to us is, to me, look, here's the bottom line. If you want to try to blow up a Keynesian-based economy without killing everybody, how do you do it? You keep everyone at home, stop them from spending. And so if that really was what the intention was, Act One is the coronavirus and locking everybody inside, blowing up a system that is based upon debt or a blanket of debt held up by consumption and spending. If you want to break the whole system for whatever your intentions are, for the fact that you've created trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars worth of debt at the lowest interest rates in human history, and there's no way out, so you blow up the whole Western-based system. You blame the Chinese, say we're not going to pay them for the bonds. You reissue gold or reclassify gold as a tier one asset. You speak of a digital-backed currency. You blow up the whole Western-based system. All government debt is forgiven. And if that doesn't work, incite insurrection and blow up the economy with an exclamation point. Kill some businesses that now will never come back. There is a fine line. Is this orchestrated? Is this part of the grand scheme? Are we going to see a gold-backed currency, a digital gold-backed currency? You keep hearing it. I just read today that the Federal Reserve is talking about using Ethereum to back the LIBOR market. More and more and more and more, you're seeing a digital currency. Why would they have reclassified gold as the only other tier one asset in the world last year, if it not to be part of a new system? And if you take a step back and look at everything I just said, basically what that would accomplish, if this is indeed what they're trying to do, is you start over. And you're going to have two systems. You're going to have a BRICS system, Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa. They're going to have their own gold-backed platform. You're going to have a Western-based system that just screwed the Chinese by not paying them what they are owed for our bonds. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just simply saying they're getting shafted. So the Chinese will have their own system with the rest of the BRICS nations, and the West, who unilaterally decided to not pay and to start all over with a new digitally backed gold currency. To me, you've just put a nail in the coffin of the Keynesian-based economies. And the fact that the Dow Jones is roaring to its all-time highs with 40 million people unemployed and businesses that'll never come back the same way, to me is just emblematic of human nature, that people eternally are optimistic and hopeful. And I don't think it's justified. Even if the coronavirus is indeed behind us, the chaos that has ensued to the economy, I don't think will come back for many, many years. So, Chris, I think that, for us to wonder if this is a planned event, if there's conspiracy, or this is just the new reality in the end, I don't know that we'll ever know, but certainly the pieces could very easily fit into a suspense novel, exactly like you're reading right now, with a whole new sunrise coming up, with a new digital backed gold currency and optimism abound and loss of privacy and liberties that this country was founded on. I think these are interesting times, to say the least, but I don't think it's over. I don't think we're out of the woods, and I don't think really we've seen the worst of it yet as it pertains to this economy.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I like to, at least I aim for doing a good job of distinguishing between what I think is fact, what's speculation, or just what pops into my mind. So, with that said, I mean, I guess the phrase controlled demolition just kept popping into my head as you were saying that, reminding me of Larry Silverstein on September 11th, where he says, pull it, and then you see a couple buildings that were never hit by a
Building
plane.
7.
And actually, Andy,
Yep.
did you know there's actually a building 6, apparently, that was never hit by a plane that also spontaneously combusted?
No, I did not, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Building 7 event alone was really the telltale sign. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there was a reporter for the BBC who was reporting that the building had already collapsed, and in fact, it had not collapsed, and then did several hours later. So, I mean, yeah, look, here again, when you're in this industry for 30 years, Chris, you're inundated with this type of rhetoric. And is it reality? Is it conspiracy? I find that so much of it makes so much sense. And there's just enough evidence to point to so much of these things that people make you feel foolish for thinking that way and call you a tinfoil hat wearing conspiratorialist. I think that there's enough evidence out there to really make you sit back and go, and think about it. I would say to you that conventional wisdom and the things that we are being fed are not always fact, and there's a little bit of truth in everything. So, yeah, Chris, I don't know where we're going, but I will tell you that a lot of what has happened to me is a whole lot more distinguished than natural and normal events.
I couldn't agree more. And again, we're going to turn it back to the metals, not trying to go down to conspiracy hour here, although it's just, I don't, when you see pictures of the artwork in the Podesta's apartment, I don't know what, and it's like when you realize these guys are running the show. These are the guys who said there were weapons of mass destruction. They knew there weren't weapons of mass destruction. There's evidence showing they knew that. And to me, when you go and slaughter a couple thousand, 100,000, or million people, usually that's called murder versus, what some of these things are going on. And again, I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm seeing the downside of some of these things today, although perhaps maybe to explain that, something that I'm guessing everyone who's listening here today noticed is that to the metals side of it, you see really the last 3 days, the prices of gold and silver smashed. Almost, it's like 8 o'clock Eastern, watch out. And
well, remember what happened today? You had the employment numbers come out. And so very often when you see these types of key reports being issued, they will try to mitigate the movement of gold and silver. Yes, it got crushed 2 days ago. It came back yesterday, got crushed again today as the employment numbers came out. And slightly better than one had anticipated. They're actually trying to tell us that a whole bunch of new jobs were created last month. I'm not quite sure how, but that's right out of the playbook. That's a common deal, Chris. Long ago, that was a trend that we started to notice. That up to the employment numbers or any other key economic indicator release, oftentimes you'd see gold hit the days leading up to it.
Yeah, it certainly been, I don't know, for me, seeing it since 2009 or 2011. And perhaps if anyone's wondering why we started the show the way we did, maybe I was awkwardly trying to make a connection between some of the problems you have when the people you're counting on for integrity and justice seem to be corrupted, because turning back to the Department of Justice, who's running an investigation, which, Andy, it's almost come November, it'll be 2 years since John Edmonds was arrested and gave or I don't know if he was technically arrested, but he gives guilty confession where he said he manipulated the markets thousands of times, widespread practice in the firm, and was done with the knowledge of his supervisors. I know you've heard the Bart Chilton interview, where one of the things that stood out to me was how I asked him about these moves in the market. He described what we're seeing, as spoofing. Now, certainly, I think selling metal that you can't deliver in massive amounts is really the heart of the issue. But essentially, what Bart described and what these guys are being arrested as, it continues to happen day after day, and it's just maybe they're sitting there and I guess my best guess is that they sit there and giggle when they hear people like you and me talk about it, thinking they're. But I mean, maybe I'm just in some way trying to express. I know a lot of other people are frustrated, where it's like you have the audacity to say there's an investigation, and then people are losing money on a daily basis, and there's no comment. They've blocked the judge has blocked the any ability to put a claim. What would you say to people about that?
I would say to people about that a few things. Number one, the first thing I'd like to say, and this is not trying to kiss your rear, but that interview that you gave is up significant, important interviews I've ever heard in 30 years in business. And I mean that sincerely. And anyone who's listening to this who hasn't listened to that interview, it should be the next thing you do if you have any intentions of understanding what's going on. I guess I would answer it this way, in two parts. Part number one, the indictments, the 6 racketeering charges levied against their traders. I guess it's real. It's real, or is it a smokescreen? Well, let me say what I mean by that. First of all, as Ted Butler says, for the very first time in 12 years, JP Morgan is now long in paper. Gold. They are record long in physical. They have, in fact, what is called by Ted Butler the largest physical privately owned position of metal the world has ever seen. Over 1 billion ounces of silver, north of 25 million ounces of gold, all accumulated while they were the largest short position on the market. Here again, that's highly illegal. Holding down the price to create the physical is not what the futures markets were ever intended to do. So if we talk about the fact that the Justice Department has issued racketeering charges against 6 of JP Morgan's traders, that's legitimate. Then for the fact that for the first time in the past 12 years, after a track record of never having one losing trade in their short position, ever, which is a mathematic impossibility, mind you, all of a sudden they're net long. Now that's very significant, on top of owning the largest physical position of gold and silver the world has ever seen, over 1 billion ounces of silver and north of 25 million ounces of gold, mind you, while they were the largest short position on the COMEX market the entire time. That's highly illegal, and certainly not in which the intention of which the futures markets were established, for a big money center to control the price in order to accumulate the physical. That is certainly not what it was intended for. So in any case, I've always felt because of that was being accumulated, perhaps, was not JP Morgan's. In fact, Blythe Masters, who ran their trading desk at one point, came out and publicly in an interview saying that it wasn't theirs, it belonged to a client. The question is, whose client is it with pockets that deep? To me, there were only 2 entities that would make sense. One, the United States government, 2, the Chinese government. In other words, they were allowed to violate antitrust laws. They were allowed to, through investigations and through Bart Chilton going to his superiors and saying that they're breaking the law, and being told this was a political decision to not prosecute, to not go after them. To me, it speaks of this metal being accumulated for either the United States government or the Chinese government. And maybe that's why we're not hearing about it, but perhaps as a condition of this this investigation that has been going on for so long, because there's been I think, a cry for it for a lot of, they have gone long on the futures market. So, the bottom line is simply this. It doesn't matter if JP Morgan gets thrown to the wolves. I don't think that'll happen. What matters is that we see some sort of a semblance of a free marketplace, one that is predicated upon fundamental supply-demand fundamentals instead of a commercial bank's ability to throw money at a market to create a perception of reality that is not correct. And so I would simply say that in the end, what we're really hoping for is not blood, not throwing JP Morgan to the fire, but more a market that allows us to invest with proper fundamentals and understand that, owning precious metals for a reason is one that'll be predicated upon economic conditions, not so much upon what the commercial banks are able to do with their trading books.
I couldn't agree more, and perhaps that's why it just is, I don't know what's the right word, maybe just disgusting watching the Department of Justice sit there. I mean, fine, I'm not a lawyer, so I understand things take time, but how about some comment where prices smashed today, yet what I find interesting, I'm pulling up the latest ETF funds. Andy, you're probably going to think I'm making this up because the numbers are so stunning, but with the newest data, take a guess how many ounces of silver have reportedly been added into these silver trusts just over the last 4 weeks alone.
25 million.
How about 74.9 million in
Yeah,
4 weeks?
Incredible.
And of course, that doesn't, if you added the week before that, that'd be another 10 million. I mean, Andy, if the Department of Justice called you and asked you, what are people doing on a retail level, can you share? I mean, is there did somebody sell a big chunk of physical silver today that you heard about that would account for that price drop?
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. The price drops are always artificial. They're always contrived. They always happen at the same time, either at the AM or the PM London fix, typically. And, it's a situation where the only way to win at this game is to have strong fingertips, Chris, and realize that this is going on until it doesn't. Until the and hopefully someday markets are ever able to be freely traded, you're just going to have to realize this is part of the game. And the only way to win is to realize that a drop like this is a subsidy. No one in their right mind would sell, God knows how much in terms of actual notional ounces onto the market at the open in a thinly traded session where, you're guaranteed to get the worst possible price as the price goes straight down. This is done for effect. It's the same thing that's happened all along for the last 12 years. It's more of the same. We have to remember that on the COMEX market, it's not just JP Morgan. There are 4 or 5 big commercial banks that are doing this. And so in the end, a lot of these commercial banks are trying to dig themselves out of these massive shorts that they've created. They've been losing a lot of money as the price has been running up. I would say to you that there's a high probability that after this washout, you see the prices really roar. If silver stays above $17, we're still in a technical bull market. And with gold above 1,700, we are still in a technical bull market. Even if it drops into the 1650s, we're still in a technical bull market. But the bottom line is that I think that this washout was done for a reason. I would not be surprised to see it really take off here into the fall. Have strong fingertips. Don't pay attention to the daily movements. Go outside and get some sun and turn your computer off. That is the way that you need to look at metals. Gold and silver are not an investment. They are wealth. They've been wealth for 6,000 years. And in the end, when the dollar bills in our wallets are hanging from a frame in the Smithsonian as a form of what once was, and we're all on a new digital currency, probably backed by gold to some extent, maybe 10, 20% backing, whatever it may be. Gold and silver will still have wealth. In the year 3000, when your great-great-great-grandchildren are spending it, it'll still be worth something. So I guess it's frustrating for us to see the price swings and realize that so much of it is contrived, but it's for a reason. That manipulation is not done in a vacuum. It's for a reason. And I have argued for a very long time the prices have been held down so the elite can accumulate it. Just like the reclassification of gold in 2019 as the only other tier one asset, if you look at what's happened since 2018, the central banks front ran that decision. You have the most sophisticated, well-funded, well-informed, influential traders on the globe gobbling it up. Regardless of what the price does, that price is being controlled so that the rest of us don't crowd them out of their trade. This is a long game trade for them. And in the end, those people who can see the fundamentals cannot be swayed by the noise, the daily price swings. In the end, the ones with strong fingertips I think, will win out, because this, again, Chris, this is far from over. Things may be a little bit better today than they were a few weeks ago, at least on the outside. But I don't think this is far from over. In fact, I was reading Marin Katusa this morning, and he had a very interesting analogy. He said basically what this is, when you look at an economy that has 40 million people unemployed and shuttered businesses and interest rates at the lowest levels in human history. The analogy he made was to an individual who was on the outside fit and tan and wearing nice clothes and looked very strong. But on the inside, he was suffering from kidney failure, high cholesterol, pre-diabetic, and heart disease. And so the point of it is that on the outside, things look okay, but on the inside, we're at right now. So I think you got to just hang on, trust your gut, and believe that, printing does not lead to prosperity. Zimbabwe and Weimar Republic, Germany have proven that. So I think, Chris, you're doing a great service to people to not just talk about precious metals, but to explore these types of ideas, whether they be considered a conspiracy or not. They're worthy of talking about, and for that, I'm glad to be part of it and continue our weekly discussion. I find it to be very important and relevant and eye-opening even to myself.
Well, I appreciate that, and I guess we talked about a little bit last week. I mean, there's part of me that holds certain things back that I hear, and maybe I'm done doing that. Where it just, yeah, and you're completely right, and I apologize everyone listening if I sound a little cranky today, because in the end, what and what we've all learned is it's really the real trick is handling those days when the price is down and just like you said, going out for a walk or, turning the computer off, getting away from the screen. And you're completely correct. I guess the thing that just bothers me is I've, for whatever reason, even when I was working on the trading floor, I was able to handle losing money or that I could handle. It's just like when you see people doing dishonest things, and then when you see really, the level of corruption that is being exposed now, some days it's a little bit much to handle, although I guess as best as, as I continue reading about some of these horrific things that are going on, I don't know, maybe just speaking up about it is what can be done. Few notes that you had in there. One about, if the metals will skyrocket from here. Again, I'll issue my disclaimer. This is based on nothing than my own intuition or maybe the conversations I'm having. But I remember wondering last week, I don't know if I told you, I told a few people that I wonder if they try and smash the price again, if that's the time where it just finally blows up in their face. I guess we'll find out soon enough. Who knows? Again, maybe the Department of Justice could call Eric Sprott. I think he's a legitimate investor. Talks about people calling him asking for 1,000-ounce bars. And the other thing that you put in there, which I found interesting, was if JP Morgan is, if that position is on behalf of a customer, which certainly I've wondered about. And I've actually been talking with someone who I think has some insight into that, who we'll be bringing on the show soon, but he seemed to feel that same thing as well. So we'll dig into it a little bit more. Andy, before we wrap up, quick on the metals, anything you were seeing this week? The most questions I get generally are people wanting just the best silver for their dollars. So curious what the order flow was like this week, and if people are looking for metal right now or want to pick up silver or gold, what if there's anything that they would be well considered to look at right now?
Yeah, here again for, I don't know, maybe the trend is continuing unabated for weeks on end. The demand for silver far exceeds the demand for gold. The demand for silver represents almost every phone call we're getting. People are saying they want to buy silver. Now, that's not to say that gold isn't in demand as well. It's just, I think people are realizing that silver is, without question, the most undervalued commodity on the planet. The premiums have come down. I don't know if I would still say a ton, but they have come down from where they were in March, considerably, I guess, but still higher than they've been most of my career. Again, indicative of the fact that silver is very difficult to come by, and it is very backlogged through most of the distributors and refiners. I honestly view this, Chris, as the last train out type of deal. If things are going to get any worse, let's hope they don't, and things go back to normal, premiums come down. But if things are going to get worse leading into the election, right now is a sweet spot. We have in stock American Eagles, is bags of junk silver. We just bought 300 100-ounce Pam Swiss bars. We have product for the first time, really, since the beginning of the year. We're pretty well stocked, but you know, it's a situation where I received a large shipment of Silver Eagles from the mint, and once they're sold out, getting another large shipment isn't so easy. So the supply chain, I don't want to let anyone think for a moment that the supply chain is fixed, because it's not. The supply chain is still very fractured and fragile at best. But for all those people that said to me in March, geez, I should have done this. I knew I should have done this a few weeks ago, a few months ago. This is a sweet spot. Row of lower prices heading into a weekend, and we have good supply. I'll beat any price in the country, Chris. If any stated internet price, if your listeners send you an email at Arcadia Miles Franklin, let us know what they want in specifics, and we will match or beat any price in the country as a way of saying thank you for what you're doing and our relationship together.
Well, I appreciate that, Andy, and it's nice. I guess that's the whole point of the show and these conversations where, I was a little riled up before we started, already feeling a little better. So I thank you for that. Thank everyone in the audience for their patience today. And perhaps to wrap up on some good news here, and I have two quick final ones I'll pass by. One I think was supposed to be a secret, but I'm just going to say it anyway. But first, I found I released an interview or video the other night, and where I was saying that essentially, like, if you see these things in government, where it's like nobody would ever invest in any company that was run with people like Pelosi and Mitch McConnell and all these guys that are, it's like, it's almost a shame that there's not a way to short government. Yet when you think about how government is funded by printed money, I came up with what I thought was a clever little headline saying buying silver is inversely like shorting government. And it was interesting. Someone noticed that and credited that quote to me. It's the most retweeted thing I've been part of since I've been doing this. So, it's interesting. It really is kind of a way of shorting government. And the last note I'll leave you with, you and I have talked about this. I don't know how we're going to do it yet. I used to wonder if this was pushing it too far, being a little bit too much of a smart ass. But I'd like to officially announce today that I'm going to find one way or another to do it. I've sent you a picture of this 1 ounce silver figurine. It's like a soldier holding a gun that's been sitting in my kitchen for a couple years now, along with the idea that I came up with in 2011 to start minting figurines, 1 ounce figurines of Ben Bernanke working a printing press, which really is a great paperweight for your desk. I mean, we could even make a whole action series. You could get the Dirty Hank Paulson. Maybe we could make one with Janet Yellen sleeping somewhere while bubbles are getting fueled. And we're also going to find a way. I know you're already putting a bid on this one. We're going to make 1,000 ounce Ben Bernanke working a printing press as an art collectible to auction off. And at least have a little fun with this stuff. One other plan that is in the works, if anyone's familiar with Veritasium, a blockchain project that at least I think got railroaded by the SEC, someone started a petition, to get people to sign and acknowledge that behavior. Along those lines, as the book I think is hitting the printer today. So one of my next projects is a petition people can get involved with saying, all right, JP Morgan, let them do whatever they want, but if you're charged with the RICO statute, you shouldn't be able to trade metals anymore. So again, where all this goes, who knows, but at least in terms of spreading awareness, having some fun doing it, and just exposing a lot of these unfortunate things that are going on. Those are some future plans. So anyway, Andy, I thank you for your support and all of that. And if anybody wants to come poke the JP Morgan or Department of Justice, bear with me, come on board, because at least on my time on this planet, I'd rather stand up for what's right, and whatever happens, so be it. But I'm had about enough. I think a lot of other people have too, and that's why I appreciate you speaking up about the things you're seeing. And with that said, I'll let you get back to it. But thanks for joining me again today. I appreciate this call as always.
Chris, there are very few people who have the courage to stand up the way that you are, and a platform in which to do it. And I admire what you're doing. I'm honored to be part of it. I'll always take center stage with you and fight the good fight. And when you make those figurines, I'll buy 1,000 of them and give them away to my clients. I think that would be fantastic. With that being said, Chris, I'll look forward to picking up with you next week. You take care of yourself, stay well, and talk soon.